we begin with the Ghislaine Maxwell transcript and audio and our justice reporter, Jake Rosen. Jake, for our audience's benefit, I'm going to play 3 different parts of the audio encounter between Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, and Ghislaine Maxwell. The first one is a conversation about President Trump. That is the president being referred to in this first excerpt.
I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
This second part of the audio from the transcript of that Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General, interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, it's a discussion about whether or not Ghislaine Maxwell believes Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide while in custody.
So you think he did not die by suicide, given all the things we just talked about?
I do not believe he died by suicide, no.
And do you believe that, do you have any speculation or view of who killed him?
No, I don't.
And this third and final part of the transcript in audio deals with what Ghislaine Maxwell does or doesn't know about Jeffrey Epstein and former President Bill Clinton.
Do you know whether, for example, President Clinton ever received a massage?
I don't believe he did.
And what makes you say you don't believe he did?
Well, because I don't, so that's a good question. The time that Epstein and President Clinton spent together, the only times I believe, well, obviously they traveled. There was that, they claim they went on the plane 26 times or whatever. That would be one journey. So they spent time on the plane together, and I don't believe there was ever a massage on the plane. So that would have been the only time that I think that President Clinton could have even received a massage, and he didn't, because I was there.
So, Jake, there are, what, about 250 plus pages in the transcript of the 300 plus,
yep.
Actually, over 2 days. And Ghislaine Maxwell, based on my quick reading of the transcripts, and please correct me if I'm wrong, comes off as someone who was around lots of things, but saw and knows practically nothing.
That's certainly how she paints herself, and I think we should remind our audience she had a lot to gain from this 9-hour-plus conversation with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Not a lot to lose, seeing she was in a maximum security prison, had already been found guilty, had been sentenced already, and this was giving, she recognized this off the bat of the interview, that she was being given a chance to finally speak, which had been her attorney's framing of this all along, and you hear her say it in her own words, that through all of these numerous investigations into Jeffrey Epstein, she says nobody from the FBI, nobody from Florida law enforcement, nobody from New York law enforcement came to talk to her. And she paints this picture that leaves out, obviously, a criminal conviction and found guilty of facts that she had assisted him in years long of grooming and sexually assaulting women.
And plenty of prosecutors believed they developed independently from her evidence to that effect.
Exactly, and I'm sure her legal teams at the time recommended that she not talk to the prosecutors.
And at trial, she did not testify.
Exactly. I think we should, and when you take a step back from this, that's certainly very clear. We know what happened, as you pointed out in your open, of what resulted after this interview. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche promises nothing. He makes that clear, and yet she was moved to a lower security prison. This is part of the Trump administration's efforts to clear the air, find out more information. I don't know how much new information really was found here outside of hearing from somebody who was intimately involved, but yet does not acknowledge specifics of many instances. A lot of the conversations around the victims are redacted, and we knew that going into this. The documents that were sent from the Department of Justice to a House committee today are going to be redacted as well in terms of specific victims and who was involved surrounding their recruitment and what happened to them. She answered the questions, as her attorney points out. There was no time where she doesn't. But at the same time, she's not exactly giving the full picture when she's only talking about how they spoke, flew on the plane together, and that's the only time. Or the only time she was with President Trump was in a social situation. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche had to prod her on specific names at times and bring up names one by one. And many of her answers, again, this is years later, but still were very rambling, moving between the alleged list to her family life and what happened to her since then, moving to the suicide, to Jeffrey Epstein's health problems, and then to obviously a central core of this, which was their sexual relationship that then she says became more of a financial agreement in which he was paid at first $25,000 a year to help him with things around his mansions, to then $250,000 a year to do everything from obviously participate in his grooming and assault scheme, but then to also be part of kind of a general manager of numerous properties, including the island, including mansions and things like that.
Very quickly, Jake, remind our audience of who Todd Blanche was before he became Deputy Attorney General. And why this makes this particular interview unusual.
Todd Blanche was a defense attorney who represented President Trump in that New York, not just the fraud trial, but I should say the hush money case that he was so controversially in going down the stretch of the election over a year ago now.
He was the president's personal attorney.
And not just in that capacity, but a vocal interviewer, a media personality going out to defend him in the hallways when the whole world felt like it was watching going down the stretch of the election. Todd Blanche was the person that stood day by day, side by side next to President Trump.
Jake Rosen, I appreciate it very much. Thank you. CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi joins me now. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. What is your 30,000-foot evaluation of this interview and what the audio and the transcripts reveal or suggest?
Yeah, nothing surprising to me here, Major. You know, both parties to this deposition understood the assignment, as it were. Todd Blanche, what did he want out of this interview? He wanted who basically the American public believes is the only person on earth, apparently, who can attest to the fact that President Trump had nothing to do with Epstein and his crimes. In fact, she testified that he was always a perfect gentleman. Nothing untoward happened in her presence. And he also wanted to get on the record that there was no client list. Remember, there's been such an uproar surrounding whether Pam Bondi and the DOJ would be releasing this client list. And then they said they would, and then they said that there wasn't a client list. So he got those two facts on the record. And what did she want? Her lawyer has not been shy about the fact that he's very interested in getting a pardon for Maxwell. There is also several appeals pending, one of which is going up to the Supreme Court. And you know, after this, as you guys have both pointed out, she was transferred immediately to a much lower security prison, which we call them Club Fed in my line of work. Okay, it's a very nice facility. And so both parties got what they wanted to out of this. This is a highly unusual way to go about doing things. Todd Blanche, you asked who he was. He also was a former assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of New York. So he understands how these things work. It's very unusual for the deputy attorney general to conduct interviews like this. Typically, you would have a line prosecutor, but in this case, there is no real point to this interview, I think, other than getting on the record what DOJ and Todd Blanche wants to get on the record for satiating sort of the American public's desire to have closure and finality in this space.
Caroline, based on your experience, was this a vigorous interrogation, and how do you think victims will read what they see or hear?
It certainly was not a vigorous interrogation, and both parties clearly had been vetted. Both parties understood that this was being video recorded, that it would be released subsequently to the general public. You'll notice Todd Blanche's questioning, the way he phrases his questions, are very specific, such as not to elicit specific instances or specific types of testimony from Maxwell. Maxwell, as you noted, has a very spotty memory, as it were. She admitted to absolutely no wrongdoing in this interview. She had very bad memory problems, although she never specifically, denied specific action. She just said, she couldn't recall things. And so, she has very little liability for perjury charges there. But, no, this was not a rigorous investigation. This was not a rigorous deposition. It was wide ranging. It was sort of all over the place. But again, I think both parties got what they wanted. This wasn't a real search for discovering anything new about Epstein's just horrific crimes. And I think the victims will likely be very disappointed.
Caroline Polisi, thank you so very much.